So this is going to be my 7.1.5 PvE Survival Hunter guide. A lot has changed since my last guide, so I'm going to be pretty much doing everything from scratch. If you want to jump to certain parts, I'll be putting timestamps in the description. So first I'm just going to start with the talents and then go for an overview of the abilities. So for level 15, pretty much the only one you want to go with is Way of the Mok'Nathal at the moment, especially seeing as in 7.1.5 they added an extra 2 seconds to the buff, so it makes it easier to keep up. This ends up giving you a 12% bonus in attack power, so that's pretty good. Throwing axes. I'd use throwing axes if you're doing something like questing or leveling, because Way of the Mok'Nathal isn't really worth keeping up in those situations. Animal Instincts, I personally wouldn't recommend it at all. It could have some uses, but I personally don't like it, the RNG aspect of it. For your level 30 talents, you have Murder of Crows, Mortal Wounds, and Snake Hunter. Here, the only useful one is a Murder of Crows, seeing as both of these you don't need, and Snake Hunter has a long cooldown, and Mortal Wounds only has a 2% chance to give you a charge of Mongoose Bite, which isn't really worth it. And a Murder of Crows does pretty decent damage. On the level 45 talents, I would go with Disengage. It can, in the PvE aspect, it can get you out of a lot of shit you need to get out of, basically. For level 60 talents, the ultimate thing to go with at the moment is Caltrops. It just does more damage than both of these in a single target raiding scenario. The level 75 talents, it doesn't really matter so much what you go with here, unless you have a certain legendary, which I will go into later, so at the moment you can take any of them. On the level 90 talents, you have Butchery, Dragon's Fire Grenade, and Serpent Sting. You either want to go for Butchery or Serpent Sting. Dragon's Fire Grenade is no longer really viable. If you're doing a Mythic Plus or something like that, Butchery would probably be the best one to go for. But if you're raiding and you need single target damage, Serpent Sting is the better. And lastly, at level 100 we have Spitting Cobra, Expert Trapper, and Aspect of the Beast. Here I would go with Expert Trapper because it increases the damage of Caltrops and Explosive Trap. Aspect of the Beast, still I find isn't very useful. It's still kind of underpowered. And Spitting Cobra can be viable now, but it's still not as good as Expert Trapper and Caltrops. One thing I will get into now is a secondary build that can kind of make the spec a bit easier to play, and that's using Spitting Cobra and Guerrilla Tactics. Seeing as Spitting Cobra will give you focus, so you'll have less downtime and you'll have more available focus to do the abilities you need to do. Just makes the spec a little bit easier to play, but you will have less DPS. Okay, moving on to a quick ability overview. So, of course, we have the main ability, which is Mongoose Bite, which does physical damage, and then each use gives you a stack of Mongoose Fury, which increases Mongoose Bite's damage by 50% for 14 seconds, and this stacks up to 6 times, so it can go up to 300% damage. Like, for example, at the moment, with this, if I get up to 6 stacks, my crits will crit for about 1 million to 1.3 million. One thing I will note about this is the timer on the buff does not refresh for each stack, so you have to really pay attention to that. Next we have Lacerate, which is a basic damage over time with no cooldown, so you can apply it to multiple targets. You can just keep applying it whenever you need to. Then we have Raptor Strike. Raptor Strike is, of course, works with the Way of the Mok'Nathal, so you need to use that to keep Way of the Mok'Nathal up. This does decent damage, and at the moment it's the only thing you can really use as a filler anyway, but most of the time you'll only be using it to keep up Way of the Mok'Nathal. Next we have Flanking Strike, which is an attack that both you and your pet do, I'm reading this. If the target is attacking you, your pet's attack will deal 50% increased damage and 400% increased threat. Otherwise, your attack will deal 50% increased damage. So if your target's attacking a tank or whatever, your hit will deal 50% increased damage. This attack also has double the chance to trigger your mastery, which is Hunting Companion, which your pet's attacks have a percent chance to give you a charge of Mongoose Bite. Next we have Murder of Crows, which was a talent. We also have Carve. This is if you don't take Butchery. This is just your basic filler AoE spell, so you don't really need to know too much about that. Then we have Caltrops, and then Explosive Trap, which I don't actually have the tooltip for because that's a macro. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, Explosive Trap, you just throw it on the ground and then it explodes for instant damage, and then it will apply a dot. One thing they added in 7.1.5 was Waylay. So if the trap stays for 2 seconds without being activated, it will stagger the target, causing them to miss their next melee attack. I can confirm this works on raid bosses. It works on literally anything. Next we have Aspect of the Eagle, which grants you and your pet 20% increased critical strike chance on all abilities, and your pet's attacks have an additional 25% chance to grant you a charge of Mongoose Bite. This lasts 10 seconds. This is Survival Hunter's main cooldown. It usually has a 2-minute cooldown, but with a legendary I have and a trait on my weapon, cooldown is reduced. I will get into that later. Next we have Fury of the Eagle, which is your artifact ability. Furiously strikes all enemies in front of you, dealing 405,000 physical damage over 3.4 seconds. Damage increased by Mongoose Fury. So let's say if you have 6 stacks of Mongoose Fury, then this will deal 300% damage, just like Mongoose Bite. Other than that, we basically just have utility and things like that. I will quick go over those. We have Freezing Trap, which of course is just Freezing Trap. It will freeze the target. It's your basically only real CC. We have Aspect of the Turtle, which prevents most damage and will reduce the damage you take by 30%. And disengages the talent. We have Harpoon, which is your engage. It's kind of like a warrior's charge. We have Exhilaration, which is your panic heal, basically. And of course we have Feigned Death. I think most people know what that does. We have Aspect of the Cheetah, which is just a simple speed boost. That's about it for abilities, apart from Hatchet Toss, which is kind of, you can just spam that whenever you're not in range, you know, just a little bit extra damage, why not? Okay, next I'm just going to be going over stat priority, best in slot legendaries, best in slot trinkets, things like that, and as well as like enchants and gems. So first I'm going to go over the stat priority. At the moment the best stat is haste, but everything's very close with survival. So after haste you can go whatever you want, but I go crit, because I like crit. But for haste, the main reason you go for it is because it can increase your focus regeneration, it lowers your global cooldown, things like that, and the lower global cooldown and even the extra focus regeneration can help you a lot with keeping Way of the Mok'Nathal up. Because you won't be waiting for focus as much, or you won't fuck up with the global cooldowns as much, things like that. Also, another thing, I think at about 15 or 16%, it can give you another global cooldown during Aspect of the Eagle, so you can get off another Mongoose Bite or whatever you want during that. Going on to the best legendaries, there are 2 best legendaries at the moment for survival. One I have, one I don't have. The one I don't have is currently the best one, which is Safuz's Secret. Successfully applying a loss of control effect to an enemy, interrupting an enemy, or dispelling any target grants you 70% increased movement speed and 25% haste for 10 seconds. This effect may occur once every 30 seconds. So this is where you have to take Ranger's Net at level 75, because Ranger's Net activates that trinket, so it'll give you a ton of haste for 10 seconds. The second best legendary is the one I have, which is Call of the Wild. Reduces the cooldown of all aspects by 35%. So I was talking about this earlier, where my Aspect of the Eagle's cooldown was getting reduced. This is one of the main things that reduces it. So with this, you can have Aspect of the Eagle up more often, seeing it as pretty much throughout your rotation, you want to be using Aspect of the Eagle as much as you possibly can. Moving on to trinkets. The best trinkets you can currently get are from Nighthold. The best one you get from Gul'dan, which is the Draught of Souls. Enter a Felcray's Rage, dealing shadow damage to a random nearby enemy every 0.25 seconds for 3 seconds. You cannot move or use abilities during your rage. 1 minute, 20-second cooldown. This also gives a ton of haste, which, like I said, is your main stat at the moment. The second best trinket is from High Botanist Talon, which is the Night Blooming Frond. Your attacks have a chance to grant recursive strikes for 15 seconds, causing your auto attacks to deal additional damage and increase the intensity of recursive strike. If for whatever reason you can't get access to these, you can't do Nighthold, you're not in a raiding guild or whatever at the moment, the second best trinkets that you can get are probably the Bloodthirsty Instinct, which is from Ursoc in Emerald Nightmare, which your range and melee attacks have a chance to increase your haste for 10 seconds. This effect occurs more often against targets at low health. And then the one to accompany this that you would want is probably the stat stick from Guam, the Eye of Guam. You would probably want to try and get one with haste, but like I said, all the stats are very close, so it doesn't matter too much. And then moving on to gems and enchants and things like that. For example, on my rings, I just have haste enchants, and you want to have... at the moment, I've only got one gem slot, and so you want to have at least one... If I can find it in inventory, you want to have at least one Saber's Eye of Agility somewhere in your gear, and then the rest you can just put haste in. For your neck enchant, you're going to want Mark of the Hidden Satyr. And for your cloak, you're going to want 200 agility. Okay, I'm just going to quick go over the artifact traits and what orders to take them in. There are multiple orders I would recommend. You can kind of pick one you want, and I will recommend the one I would personally go for. So the first one I'm going to say is you, of course, go Iron Talons, then Hellcarver, then Raptor's Cry, then Explosive Force, then Aspect of the Skylord. Then you come back over here, you go Sharpened Fang, My Beloved Monster, Bird of Prey, Embrace of the Aspects, Fluffy Go, and then you come back down here to Hunter's Guile, then Lacerating Talons, and then you can get these two golden traits. The reason I say to get these two golden traits last is because at the moment they don't do much DPS. Like, I can't remember which order it goes in, but one of them does about 1% my DPS, and the other will do about 2 or 3%. So it's up to you if you want to take them, but personally I'd hold off on them. So the next way I would recommend going is basically the opposite of that first way, which you go to Sharpened Fang, My Beloved Monster, Bird of Prey, Embrace of the Aspects, Fluffy Go, and then you come down here, you go to Hellcarver, Raptor's Cry, Explosive Force, Aspect of the Skylord, Hunter's Guile, Lacerating Talons, and then the two Goldens. Of course, after all this, you would fill those two out and then come down here to Voice of the Wild Gods, but these two do not increase your DPS at all, so you probably want to do those last. But the third way, I will say, is if you want pure single target DPS as quick as you can. And this way I would say go Sharpened Fang, My Beloved Monster, Terms of Engagement, Raptor's Cry, Explosive Force, Aspect of the Skylord, Hunter's Guile, Lacerating Talons, Eagle's Bite, Fluffy Go, Embrace of the Aspects, and then Bird of Prey and Talon Strike, and then Hellcarver. But I wouldn't really so much recommend skipping Hellcarver, especially not with Nighthold being out now, because a lot of fights in Nighthold are very ad heavy. So Hellcarver can really increase your damage against adds. So yeah, those are the 3 ways I would recommend. In terms of my personal preference, I am kind of torn between the first two, but I would say go for the first one. So you would go Hellcarver, Raptor's Cry, Explosive Force, Aspect of the Skylord, then up here, and then these two. Because without that, well, in general, Survival doesn't have much burst, but then without that trait, they have even less burst, so you can really fall behind at the start. In terms of relics and what traits they should buff, at the moment I would recommend trying to get them to buff Sharpened Fang and Fluffy Go. I think those would probably be the best ones, but I might be wrong. I'm not entirely sure, but those are the ones I would recommend. So next I'm just going to go over my rotation and things like that, but quickly before I do that, I'm just going to get into macros and add-ons that you might use that would be helpful. So first I'm just going to get into macros. Okay, so the first macro I would say is extremely useful at the moment for survival, seeing as they changed it so that you have to place explosive trap. So, well, for caltrops as well, so usually you'd have to click it and then click to place. But with this macro, you can simply just one button, place your mouse wherever you want it to go, and it will go there. So as you can see, the macro here, you just do this, and then if you want it for a different trap or you want it for caltrops, you just replace explosive trap with the name of the trap or caltrops. I will copy and paste this into the description, so if you want to just copy it, that's fine. Another macro is a very simple one. You can just put it on any ability. It doesn't have to be Mongoose Bite, where whenever you use that ability, your pet will attack your target. This can be useful for target switching fights, because for example, if you're on one target and then you switch to another, your pet doesn't automatically come with you. So your pet could be out of range for, let's say, flanking strike, which is a very big part of your DPS. So that can really fuck up your DPS. So with this macro, it will basically always be with you. Next, I'm just going to get into add-ons. Weakauras is a very good thing to use. I'm not very accustomed with it, honestly. So I don't even know how to get into the interface anymore. I just have it set up. But I'm saying you want to have Weakauras for your Mongoose Fury, and you want to have it for Mok'Nathal, Way of the Mok'Nathal, which the buff is actually called Mok'Nathal Tactics. But you want to have it for both of those. You can probably find those online somewhere. I'm sorry I can't give them to you. If I do find them, I'll put it whatever into the description, but for now, I'm not sure. You might also want it to track your lacerate dot or something like that, because lacerate no longer has a cooldown, so you can just use it whenever. Okay, getting into the actual rotation, first you just want to start off simply do a harpoon, then we'll do a raptor strike, then a murder of crows, then a raptor strike, then you do explosive trap, then a raptor strike, then you do caltrops, then a raptor strike, then you do a lacerate. Now after this you can either do like another raptor strike if you just want to be careful about it, so you can just do another raptor strike, then you do one mongoose bite, and then you activate aspect of the eagle, and then you just spam mongoose bite until you run out, and just make sure to keep your Mok'Nathal tactics up, and then keep spamming mongoose bite, and then if you run out of mongoose bites, you do flanking strike, and just before your Mongoose Fury runs out, you want to use your artifact ability, which is Fury of the Eagle. I didn't do like the whole rotation properly there, but before you do Fury of the Eagle, you want to make sure that you've kept your Mok'Nathal tactics up, because remember, Fury of the Eagle lasts for around 4 seconds, so you want to have at least 5 seconds of Mok'Nathal tactics to do that, because as soon as Fury of the Eagle ends, hopefully you'll have another charge of Mongoose Bite. So like a split second before Fury of the Eagle ends, you can just cast that Mongoose Strike and it will activate at 6 stacks when the buff has basically already ended. So that's pretty much the basis of it, and I will just show you it fully in practice now. I made a few mistakes there and got a bit bad RNG, but hopefully you get the base understanding of the spec. As you can see, you don't want to use Mongoose Bite when you only have like one charge. You want to do it with at least two charges, and at the same time you don't want to use Aspect of the Eagle too early. You might want to wait a bit. But yeah, that's the basis of the spec and the rotation, and hopefully you can follow that quite easily. It is a complex spec. It's one of the more complex specs in the game. Even I still have some trouble with it, and I've been playing it since the start of the expansion. But I hope this guide helps you, and if you have any suggestions or anything like that, please comment below. I'll be happy to read them. One thing I forgot to do quickly that I thought to show you is a quick show what does what damage in this spec. So for example, I'll show you quick, I was talking about the two golden traits on the trail and Talon Strike. As you can see, they don't really do that much damage. On the trail did about 3% and Talon Strike did like 1.8%. I mean, they might be worth it, but it's entirely up to you if you want to take them. If you feel that that extra percent is worth it, go ahead. It's just my opinion, and your opinion may be different. But as you can see, the main focus of the entire spec is Mongoose Bite. That is your damage. Mongoose Bite is everything. And then the dots, of course you want to keep them up as much as possible, but they're not the main focus. Mongoose Bite and keeping your mock lethal tactics up, that is the main focus of the spec. So I think that's one quick thing just about Talon Strike. You can see my neck enchant did more damage than Talon Strike. So yeah, that's about it. So thank you for watching.